Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, good evening and welcome to this Wednesday edition of The Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo. On the show tonight,
and brand all those people racist. I won't ever accept it, and I'll never apologize for calling those people heroes.
DA leader John Steenhuisen is digging in his heels. He finds nothing wrong with the posters his party has put up in and around Phoenix in KwaZulu-Natal. We bring you his explanation before our panel of analysts weighs in. After that, we ask whether there's a correlation between a municipality's capacity to keep its books squeaky clean and its ability to deliver services. Our guests for that segment hail from two municipalities that have received clean audits 4 years in a row. That and more in tonight's edition of The Watchdog, which starts right now. DA leader John Steenhuisen is having none of it. He's adamant the people of Phoenix who defended themselves during the looting and violence that gripped parts of KwaZulu-Natal in July are heroes. This despite many criticizing the DA, saying its advert was fanning racial tensions. DA Johannesburg mayoral candidate Mpho Phalatse has called on the party to reconsider their messaging on the posters. Well, a short while ago, our
the DA
political
stands up very firmly for non-racial.
Mzwandile Mbeja spoke to John Steenhuisen, and this is how that interview went.
The DA stands up very firmly for non-racialism. It's one of our core values, and it's carried through in everything we do. And I think that if you go back and look at the origin of this issue, it was precisely the racial scapegoating of the community of Phoenix, who were targeted as one, and against people who stood up in the retreat of law and order and the failed state to be able to protect themselves and their families. And whether that the taxi drivers who protected the malls, whether they are citizens who manned barricades, I regard them as heroes. I don't regard as heroes people who were looting and responsible for the violence, and also those who were vigilantes and took the law into their own hand. And we've been very clear that we're a party that believes firmly in the rule of law, and we will always stand up for citizens who stand up on the side of the law. We will never defend the indefensible, as we saw some of the acts here, on both sides of the looting and, of course, the community, where people took the law into their own hands, and that's not acceptable.
I think here is what perhaps confuses me a little bit. We're sitting here, we are in the city of Johannesburg. The person you want to run the city doesn't share your views. And this is the top brass of the DA. So early on, is the house getting divided here?
Well, first of all, let me just say I haven't had a chance to speak to Mpho Phalatse or to interrogate her. I was with her this morning. She was with me on the march this morning. She was with me when I made the comments to your journalist. So let me be very clear as well that the top leadership of the DA and the campaign team are responsible for the messaging. It may have caused some miscommunication. There may have been people who've misinterpreted it, and for that I'm sorry. But what I'm not going to be sorry for is standing up for non-racialism and standing up against the racial scapegoating. And what I find very strange is that there's all this outrage now about the poster that's gone up. But there was not equal outrage when the EFF and ANC were marching through the streets of Phoenix holding posters that said, you know, racist Indians. All Phoenix people are bloodthirsty Indians. That's the type of racial stereotyping which I'm implacably opposed to. But certainly, the people and the villains in this are the retreating state who couldn't keep people safe, which is why our manifesto is a plan about how we can improve local policing, because clearly the SAPS are not up to the task. And secondly, the fact that when the ANC turned around through a variety of their spokespersons and called everybody in Phoenix racist, I think that's wrong. And I will, to my last breath, fight against that type of racial stereotyping and scapegoating.
Some of the family members of the people who were killed there have come out and said, how can the leader of the official opposition brand those people heroes when we have lost our children?
But you see, you're missing the point again. And the point is that the people who were involved in looting and the people who were involved in the acts of vigilantism where people were murdered are the villains. I've said that very clearly. They're not the heroes. I've never once called those people the heroes, whether I was on the ground in KZN when I was with many of those families and both sides, in Chatsworth, Phoenix, and Amaoti and Ananda. I was very, very clear that we would be taking steps against it. In fact, many of those cases I personally raised with the station commissioner in Phoenix and the station commissioner in both police stations in Chatsworth, because we want justice for those people. I will never support vigilantism, people taking the law into their own hands. What I will support is citizens who are standing up, defending themselves when the government that's supposed to protect them, the state's primary duty is to keep citizens safe. When they ran away and retreated and left those communities to fend for themselves, and then the ANC and EF have come around and brand all those people racist, I won't ever accept that, and I'll never apologize for calling those people heroes.
Do you realize the kind of outrage those posters are causing? That is why right at the beginning I started with quoting your own leader, the mayoral candidate of this city. Do you realize that if people from within your ranks, someone you were with the whole day today, feels the way many people are feeling, do you realize, perhaps, are you able to take a step back and say, perhaps I need to withdraw from some of the strong statement I'm making?
Well, what I've said to you earlier is I'm very sorry for people who've misinterpreted it or fell victim to the misrepresentation of what has been said there. That's not what was being said. Nowhere have we supported the perpetrators of violence, either the looting and the violence, or those who took the law into their own hands. I've been very clear on that. Those people are not heroes. They are villains. They must be prosecuted.
John Steenhuisen, the leader of the Democratic Alliance, speaking to our political editor, Mzwandile Mbeja. Let's welcome our panelists for this evening. Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, who's a professor of politics at the University of Johannesburg, and Asanda Ngwasheng, who is an independent political analyst who seemed to be having a bit of a problem with Professor Ndletyana's line. I hope we'll be able to bring him up in a second. Asanda, a very good evening to you. Thanks very much for joining us. Just what you make of what you've heard John Steenhuisen saying there.
Good evening, and thank you for having me, Vuyo. I'm not surprised that this is the line that the DA has taken. I'm not surprised that this is the kind of response that the DA is giving, because they have been on this clear path of deliberately misunderstanding what non-racialism is and deliberately misconstruing it to mean something other than what it actually means. And I think that if you listen to him carefully, he says they have no problem. They think that people who stood their ground and protected themselves when the government failed are heroes. They don't support people who took the law into their own hands and were part of the killings in Phoenix. And I'm interested to find out how he defines, like, where does he draw the line between those he calls as heroes who basically stood up, as he said, and those who took the law into their own hands. Because we know what happened in KZN was that there was a situation which very quickly became racialized. There was a situation where Black people who had nothing to do with the looting found themselves unable to get food, unable to buy food even when they had all the money in the world in their pockets, because they were being misunderstood, stereotyped, and assumed to be part of the looting. And that is racism, the assumption, the negative stereotypes that you attach to blackness. I mean, I'm happy to audit a free diversity training lesson because they keep showing us that they actually don't understand race and they don't understand racism. And I'm saying this because I'd rather believe that than believe the other reality, the other alternative, which is that the DA, as has been increasingly happening, is going the Trump route. They are going right wing, and they're actually not scared of the repercussions of their going right wing, and they're whistleblowing to racists and people who hold prejudiced views against Black people. And we know and we understand that we come from a history in South Africa of apartheid, wherein the lives of white people were the premium lives and the most protected, then followed by the lives of Indian people, then the lives of colored people, with the lives of Black people right at the bottom.
Oh, okay, that's fine there.
This kind of thinking is to be expected. This kind of thinking should not be surprising, because John Steenhuisen, what he's doing is he's harking back to those with apartheid nostalgia in the lives of white people, then Indians, then coloreds, were more important than the lives of the Black Africans of this country. And I think that we need to condemn it with the strongest terms. And I believe that particularly the family members of those people who were killed need to be going to the Equality Court. I think the IEC itself needs to actually step in on this. It is unacceptable in this country with such a volatile history of race and racism to be harking back, whistleblowing, and kind of allowing people to have this apartheid nostalgia and re-establishing the hierarchy of humanity that reads and decides that Black lives are really not worth much, and so we can say and do whatever we want. And unfortunately, it is a thing that in South Africa where we don't talk about things until they blow up in our faces. And one of the things we have not dealt with deliberately or enough is the racism, the internalized racism that Indian people in South Africa hold, particularly against Black people. And this can be drawn as far back as Gandhi, who was very clear in his racism of calling that, of basically calling for the state to protect the Indians over the Blacks, and not supporting the Blacks in any way when he was here. And that is somebody that still to this day in South Africa is considered as a hero by many in spite of his racism. And these are the things that the DA's strategies and the DA's maneuverings are forcing us now to dig up. And I think maybe that's not a bad thing, because we need to have these conversations and we need to be open and honest about it. There was a hierarchy of humanity, and that hierarchy of humanity continues to this day. You go to any corporate in South Africa, whether in Johannesburg, Cape Town, or anywhere in this country, and you will see that the most senior people are white, usually followed by Indian people, then colored people, and right at the bottom are Blacks. And we need to stop pretending like this is not the case, and we need to unpack what is racism in a South African context, and how is it that Indian people were oppressed as indentured slaves and indentured labor, and colored people were slaves, but then during apartheid were put in the middle between Black and white people, were given South African passports and South African IDs and allowed to be citizens, while the Black people of this country were treated as foreigners and secondary citizens in the country of their birth. We need to have these conversations, because if we don't, people like Steenhuisen are going to come and are going to try and paint a new picture of this country.
Okay, let's bring in Professor Mcebisi Ndlegana. Prof, I hope you were able to, if not everything, at least get the gist of that clip we played of that conversation between our political editor, Mzwandile Mbeje, and John Steenhuisen, the leader of the Democratic Alliance. And if you indeed did, what did you make of that conversation?
Well, I got the gist, missed a few details. two things from my side. Is that it's either laziness or incompetence, really, to go for that kind of ad. Obviously, this is election time, and parties look at exploiting certain events. But I thought that the DA, or rather a lot has happened in KZN for the DA to exploit, especially the events around the upheaval and the looting and all that. Though that ugly incident was partly orchestrated by ANC people infighting within, and that alone, I think, is exploitable. So they did not have to go to this kind of racism. So they went for the most obvious. They kind of succumbed to base instincts of prejudice and racism. Instead of thinking creatively about how to capitalize off that ANC infighting. However, though, I think the fact that they didn't bother to stretch their imagination is to some degree an indication of how much they have resigned themselves to being a right-wing conservative party. I think they are competing with the Conservative Party, FF+, in terms of their conservative credentials to appeal to the conservative right-wing fringe voters as defenders of white privilege. What you have here essentially is a return to Tony Leon, DA, defenders of white privilege. And the fact that they kicked out Mosi and a whole lot of other black people and brought in Helen Zille, and Helen going on with typical right-wing stuff, that alone was an indication that the DA had decided to march back into the future, so to speak. So they are showing us what they are, and I don't think we should be surprised. And Steenhuisen's election through Helen Zille was always an indication that he was going to be a manifestation, if not a proxy, of Zille's kind of politics. And so he is showing us exactly what he is. I don't think we should be surprised, yeah?
Now, there's somewhere where he says the messaging for the election, or the party's messaging for the election, rests with a committee that they have entrusted with that. Now, I couldn't make head or tail of that. I couldn't understand whether he was trying to say, don't hold us as the DA leadership responsible for that. That's something that a little corner of our election machinery had to do. But he didn't develop that point fully. In other words, he didn't take it to its logical conclusion, which for me suggested that perhaps, he said something that he didn't want to say, or midway through felt that, maybe this will be seen to be me making excuses, which I don't want to do because I actually believe in, that these people are indeed the heroes that I've said they are.
Well, I mean, that response alone is really not smart, is it? Because it's still part of the DA, whether a small committee or big, whether Durban or Cape Town, it's all the same party, right? So I think it did not have a clever response to respond to Mzandi's question. But it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's just dumb politics. It's a demonstration of sheer incompetence. Because we don't need to be racist when there's a lot of material to play with. For instance, I saw their ad yesterday about their performance in many other municipalities where they get certificates, and they contrasted those awards with ANC mediocrity, and there's a lot of ANC mediocrity. So I thought that contrast alone was perfect. So why not play on that contrast? Why go? Why be racist? Because it's self-defeating.
Asanda, I mean, if he said at some point that if anyone is racially stereotyping people, it is actually the ANC, you know, which he says has called the people of Phoenix, who he says rose to defend their lives, their properties, bloodthirsty Indians. So, and at some point he goes on to say that he is the one, or his party is the one that is actually standing up for non-racialism here.
And two wrongs don't make a right. So just because the ANC did something wrong, which it was wrong to call people bloodthirsty Indians, as if all Indian people were involved in the killing of the 30+ people that were killed during what happened in KZN. So just because the ANC did something wrong doesn't mean he can now take it a step further and call people who are racist and were motivated by racial hatred to kill Black people heroes. And I think that for me, what's fascinating is thinking through, why is it that the DA has always relied on dog whistling, on this harking back to apartheid language in all of their campaigns? Every single election, we had take back Cape Town. We've had all kinds of posters that basically kind of demonstrate or show that there's still this belief that certain areas like Cape Town belong only to white people and should continue to belong to white people. And if you live in Cape Town, you'll know that for the most part, Cape Town is very much a white city. In fact, it has the highest number of white people in South Africa concentrated in one area. And so this kind of politics works for them. But the sad part is that white people only constitute 8% of the South African population. The rest is Black, colored, and Indian. And so they're harking back again to the very same old and trusted apartheid politics of throwing in Indians and colored people as their buffer zone, as their sort of, the people that they send out when they want to do and say things that are racist, because it's more complex to explain internalized racism than it is to explain plain old racism that white people perpetrate upon Black people all the time. And for me, it's really getting exhausting having to constantly be talking about how there's a certain level of apartheid denialism that the DA loves to engage in. And I'd like to see the Equality Court challenge them on this. And I'd like to see organizations that have an interest in moving forward as South Africans in ways that are not about constantly re-traumatizing each other. I would like those organizations to start engaging the Constitutional Court, to start engaging the Equality Court, to say, is it okay to have these kind of strategies that continue Swat Ghafar, that continue the idea that only certain types of people belong in certain types of spaces? Because until we do that, until we start taking racists to court, until we start challenging people head on, we are going to continue to see this. And there's a sense in which Black pain is never acknowledged, and there's a laughing off about it, that this is not painful for people, that so many people lost their lives, and you want to call people heroes and then pretend like you made a distinction. When people were standing and blocking any Black person, they were not checking if this person was involved in looting or not. They were blocking any Black person. You had even somebody like Minnie Dlamini tweeting at some stage that her parents could not get food, who had nothing to do with looting. They couldn't get food in the neighborhood they lived in. And this is the kind of stuff that Steenhuisen wants us to believe makes people heroes. Which country is he living in?
But Prof. Ndegana, I mean, at some point during that conversation, John Steenhuisen says or suggests that the only sin that those people committed was to stand up when the government or state law enforcement agencies had either retreated or just stood by, and they were punished for that. And he has chosen to, call them what they are to him, heroes?
Look, there's some truth in that, but don't.
But is it a defense, though?
It's not an appropriate defense. Look, I think, and this is why, I keep on harping about their stupidity. They're really being foolish. In that, anybody who felt besieged, that their lives were threatened, is quite entitled to defend themselves, especially those who are attacking, are violent and all that. And you do have, in Phoenix and anywhere else, I guess, folks that were genuinely threatened by these thugs, right? So they are quite within, they are right within the law to use force to defend themselves. So he can make that argument, Voyo, and say those folks are heroes. However, in the midst of all that, you had the roads that went around shooting at black folks, right? Those are obviously not heroes. So you can easily make a distinction. You can call the heroes who defended their property, who stood up for their own community. You can call them heroes. That's fine. There's nothing wrong. But you need not generalize, because when you generalize, it means you are condoning the potential murderers amongst them. And there's no need for that. So what they needed to do was to customize their messaging, right? Especially middle-class folks who live in suburbs who were threatened by the specter of violence. They feel that the state is not protecting them as a sense of lawlessness. So you can speak about issues of law and order and promise that and bring up Cape Town or whatever other city that they have run well. And then speak to black people and say, look, you've been, your municipalities are not being run well, especially in the townships, there are potholes. We have cases, for instance, now in Queenstown where a stadium of 15 million, an open patch of ground, actually, which supposedly cost 15 million. That's typical ANC mediocrity. And say in under DA-run municipalities, you won't have that mediocrity. Clearly defined messages, customized to different constituencies, that is being smart. In this case, Voyo, yes, it's a racist ad, but I think there's a far deeper problem of stupidity here. It really is that.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Special thanks to both our guests, Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana from the Politics Department at the University of Johannesburg. Asanda Ngwasheng is an independent analyst. After the break, clean audits versus service delivery. Does achieving a clean audit necessarily make you a good performer when it comes to service delivery? That conversation in a moment. Don't go away. In the past 5 years, the DA-run Midvaal municipality and the ANC-run Okahlamba are two of a handful of South African municipalities that have consistently achieved clean audits. 4 in a row, to be exact. Now, according to the Auditor General in her last report on municipalities, the outgoing crop of administrations are leaving the space in a worse state than they found it. So how did these two and about 4 or 5 others actually manage to do it? Well, Bongani Baloyi is the outgoing mayor of Midvaal municipality. Okahlamba municipality is represented this evening by Khona Nduli, who is its chief financial officer. Zugi Swakota is the head of monitoring and advocacy at the Public Service and Accountability Monitor. Good evening to all 3 of you. Thanks very much for agreeing to come on the program.
Good evening, Vuyo, and thank you for the opportunity.
Great. But I'm going to start, with you. And but I remember last month, your boss, political boss, who's currently embroiled in the whole advert in Phoenix, he had lots of good things to say about you and about how well you did. But congratulations. 4 clean audits in a row is a mean feat, considering that there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of you who actually managed to that out of about 260 or so municipalities across the country. How did you achieve it?
Well, thank you, Vuyo. It's actually 7 consecutive clean audits, which one has achieved in the term of office to date. So I just think I must put that record very clear, because
thank you so much.
It's a state of fact.
Well, I was talking about the past term, obviously, the past 5 years, which is coming to an end on November 1. But yeah, thank you for reminding us of that, which is no mean feat, yes.
Correct. For me, what has been important and what we owe our record of performance to date has been, I think, from the leadership and the ability and capability of individuals who are tasked with leading government from our side, which was then supported by a professional, competent and professional civil service whom do their work and don't look at or pay much attention to what's happening in politics. But equally, we created an environment with these 2 components of service delivery focus, where we refined our service delivery methodology, where we're able to consistently deliver results that show a material improvement in the lives of our community. And we can actually demonstrate to our community in a transparent manner that we are improving the governance of the institution. At the same time as we are doing so, we are ensuring that the scarce resource that we have, that they should be going to resources or the improvement of their communities, is actually going there with very strong internal mechanisms, systems and processes internally to ensure that we do that. So I think it's a number of these factors which has created the type of environment where the institution is doing well, the institution is able to deliver services and to show an incremental growth over services that we've been in government.
Konantuli, what did you guys do at Okahlamba?
Vuyo, the municipality of Okahlamba has maintained 6 clean audits in a row, where in some case it was the only municipality in the province receiving a clean audit. The tone, Vuyo, that is set by our political leadership is very good to us, and it is assisting us as the municipality to make things easier to us as administration. The political support, the community support, the management support, Vuyo, has been tremendously good and helped us in maintaining a clean audit in the municipality. The council that took over the municipality was previously placed under the administration in 2011, where there was maladministration, mismanagement of funds. And then the administrator appointed a new management with a new political leadership, which is a ruling party now, an ANC. The political party played a huge role to the municipality, where they don't tolerate any misconduct or any unethical behavior, either from the politicians or from the officials. In the cases of alleged misconduct, the actions are taken right there by the council, where the council took a resolution to do the investigations on time, to report the cases with SAPS, so that the people that are liable are being held liable and account for their actions. So it's been helping a municipality a lot. The systems that we put in place as the municipality are working for the municipality. The structural committees who are playing an oversight to assist the council in taking the right decisions and resolutions.
Zuki Sokota, I mean, your organization has been involved, has been in this space for many, many years. Some of us would remember you from, the very first administrations, really pushing hard for the culture that these two representatives of these two municipalities are talking about to actually become a norm. For years, you struggled against odds to just get the ear, of those in power, just to get them to listen to your concerns, and as you are advocating for the kinds of things that these two, have done and actually done very well. What has been your experience as to, in instances where you've been able to zoom in? I know, for instance, in municipalities like Makana, where you know the ins and outs of such municipalities. What does a municipality need to be able to have the kind of culture that sees, consecutive clean audits being achieved by a municipality?
Yeah. Thanks, Rio. I think a really important question, and much of the answer to that question lies in what the Auditor General has been saying, and the various Auditor Generals since, looking back to the reports of Mr. Terence Nombembe when he was
the shock at fake before Terence Nombembe.
Yeah. No. Yes. So really, I think the one key thread across all of those years has been the message, and I think Siskona has emphasized that, is the value of decisive political leadership. In the most recent AG report on municipalities, and just to say that the rigor and reliability for us of the audit reports by the Auditor General's office have really been a hallmark of the country's public finance management environment. So I think that's an immediate thing that we would want to emphasize. But to come back to your question, a really fundamental need is to have the political leadership. The one, most recent report emphasized that the municipalities that tended to have the best outcomes, at least in terms of clean audits, we're not talking yet of service delivery. I think that's a separate issue by and large. But the municipalities that had strong track records of clean, audits were those that also had, premiers and MECs who really were behind the work and were supportive of either institutional change or really backing any corrective action that needed to be taken. And that was actually highlighted in the AG's report in June, which for us is really indicative of the need, again, for meaningful and decisive political leadership. The other aspect of Rio that I would say, in terms of your question about what is needed, is without a doubt, the culture of accountability, not just in terms of accountability to internal structures, but a culture of accountability to the people that ultimately you should be seeking to serve, the people that ultimately you should be seeking to report to, and those are not within the party structures. Those are the people, the public. The people who are waiting for water to be delivered, the people who are desperate for housing, the people who, in the context of COVID-19, were desperate for meaningful responses to the COVID-19 context by municipalities. So I think, as a starting point, those two areas are really, really important. And I think we must never underplay the importance of the political leadership. And then the technical expertise. We heard in the AG's report that I believe in the region of R1 billion was spent on consultants across the country, across municipalities, to little meaningful outcome. And so that's another area that I think we need to look at, is the technical expertise internally across the country.
Kwana, and this is from what Zukiswa has just said about decisive political leadership, which ties in with what you said at the beginning of your previous input, which you called the tone, or you referred to as the tone set by the political leadership. And I'm going to come to Bongani because he represents that leadership that kind of like sets the tone. But from where you sit now as a bureaucrat and as an official, how does the political leadership, in very real and practical terms, how does the political leadership set that tone for you as officials so that you know that this is what they want and you dare not fail to give that to them and to the people of your municipality?
Thank you, Fugo. One of the tone that is set by Okahlamba local municipality, the political leadership, maybe if I may mention one, is the audit report of the Auditor General. When the Auditor General issue an audit report, there are issues that need management's attention on that report. And on that report, as the municipality, we are required to develop an action plan to address those findings that are issued by Auditor General. Because remember, if you don't developing the action plans to attend to those findings, there is an opportunity that you will fall into the same problem in the next financial year. So we take those reports, we submit them to e-council. On a monthly basis, we do report progress. The council of Okahlamba local municipality want us to tell them of the progress in addressing the issues that are raised by Auditor General. Again, the issue of the unauthorized, irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Vugo, you remember that the Act says the municipal manager needs to make sure that there is a system to prevent such expenditure. So as the municipality, if ever there are any cases or any expenditure like that, we do report on a monthly basis to the council. We don't wait on a quarterly basis, but on a monthly basis. And the council takes resolutions right there to say, investigations need to be done here and there. And then the investigations are done as per the council resolution. Over and above that, on a weekly basis, we do have management meetings where the council resolution register is developed and presented on that management committee, where we track progress to say, as per the council resolution number 1, what have we done as the management? Have we implemented? If not, why are we not implementing? And report back to the council.
Bongani, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you go around your Tansalga things. You speak to your colleagues and peers, and what do you think is where is the biggest difficulty? In other words, what makes it difficult or impossible even for political principals to not set the tone that Kwana was talking about, or to show the decisive political leadership that Zukiswa was talking about? And how have you gone about doing it now, as when you look at what other people in your position don't get to do?
Look, I can only assume what may be the issues that others are facing and what they have not been able to overcome. And I suspect that at the top of the list is the issue of lack of leadership, because everything is a manifestation of lack of leadership. And secondly, it could be the issue of lack of political will to be able to do your job, irrespective of the political ramifications. And you don't just set the tone by speaking, you set the tone by doing things and reminding people that in the event you do something that transgresses against the laws and regulations that we are all sworn to uphold, something will happen, and that's clear, decisive, and just consequence management. So I've been able to do those things without even blinking, without caring whether this person is my friend or political ally or not. For me, it means nothing, because what means something for me is the oath of office that I took and undertook to do specific set of things and obey the laws and do my job. And that's exactly what I've been able to do. Over and above, from my side, what I've been able to do consistently was to deeply imprint into the psyche of the institution a performance culture, but equally consequence management as well. And these are very important, because if you don't do these things, what you don't evaluate regularly, you don't have the ability to keep your finger on the pulse firmly, and at any given point in time to understand and be able to tell the performance of the institution, but equally be able to detect early when things are starting to move aside, so you can rein them in and ensure that we walk in this direction that has been previously determined by the leadership of the institution. So I think these things are very important, but all of these, the leadership and the ability, the strong governance of the institution, internal systems controls, skilled and professional civil service, all of these are able then to create an environment of delivery of protecting the institution. And then one thing I may say just towards the end is that when you see these things of maladministration, corruption, I can tell you and guarantee you that it is not by mistake. Often these things are done by intention. The breaking and just fragmenting the governance and weakening of governance in the institution is by design to allow thieves to get access to the fiscus of the municipality and do as they want. So when you see those things, you must know it's not by mistake, it's by design.
But do you adopt the same attitude towards service delivery? In other words, are you delivering services, on the ground, water, sanitation, electricity, with the same commitment, enthusiasm, and zest that we are seeing you doing when it comes to, clean audits?
Absolutely. 60% of the CAPEX budget over the past term has been spent in poor communities. We've actually spent a lot in social infrastructure and engineering infrastructure. We're building substations to feed and increase access to your silo in the main, which is the main thing you show. It surprises me that you can't get any other black community in Midvaal. When you think services, you always project the same image of silo, and you neglect Lakeside, you neglect Ward 10, you neglect other places where black people live, and there's infrastructure, be it engineering and social infrastructure. And the story of Sicelo is one that you don't adequately reflect properly, because you don't mention that there's families which have been resettled in Sicelo. They may live in a shack, but they actually own those pieces of land. The municipality now is actually busy with reticulation for water after building our reservoirs. Now we're reticulating water in those stands. Electricity, as I mentioned, the substation is being built. You don't mention all of these things, and you don't actually draw out the difference between the competencies of local government and provincial government. So we keep being hammered for the same thing of Sicelo situation, but you don't actually distinguish between what is a municipal competence, what is a provincial competence, and hold people to account whom is their direct responsibility to do so. And always talking about the same thing, which is Sicelo, and neglecting other areas of Lakeside and various other areas to show what we are doing there, I think is quite frankly disingenuous. And it's showing one particular agenda and not showing the full picture, which can actually detail what we've been able to do. And then we can draw a direct correlation between our clean audits and service delivery on the ground.
I'm sure our teams on the ground are in fact listening. Kona, in your situation, have you been as vigilant, with service delivery as you have been with how you manage your books?
Thank you, Boko. When I joined the municipality in 2012, there was no robot in this municipality. Today, in Jogo, we have robots in Bergville through e-service delivery that is done by our municipality. We have been able to reach over 90% of connections for electrification in the area of Bergville. We have access roads, we have community halls. we have in communicating with our community and listening to them, what are their priorities, what are their needs. When we went to the community, we found out that the community were complaining about them going a long distance to access services, such as services from SASSA, from Department of Labor, etc. We also had the community concerning about the licensing center. They had to go a long distance to get those services. They had to go to our neighboring towns like Escort and Ladysmith. But as the municipality, we are a small municipality, but we tried our best to listen to the needs of the community and make sure that while maintaining the clean audits, but we do also deliver e-services to the community. So we do it parallel and equally. We have built a community service center where the community of Bergville is now happy. They are accessing those services within the area of Bergville. There is a testing center that is built by the municipality. All of those services are being accessed by the community. So the community of Bergville is very happy.
Okay.
However, there are challenges there and there.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to stop there. Sorry, I have run out of time because of the story we had to do earlier. Zuki, so I'm going to give you like literally 10 seconds about things that, you know, the new people who will be voted in after on November 1 should really take into account.
Yeah, it's an absolute pity that we weren't able to get to the nub of our conversation, Rio, and I think that's it is what it is, but it's unfortunate.
I promise we'll get back to it.
What we needed to talk about, I think, are the links between clean audits and service delivery.
Yes.
I think it was interesting to me that, you know, Mr. Baloyi mentioned, you know, CAPEX spending on the one hand, but that also doesn't mean very much until you've been able to kind of compare to the, you know, lived experiences of communities and people that actually are at the other end. We've seen a lot in the media recently about that, you know, broken link between what is spent, what is planned, and ultimately the services people, you know, receive. So I think there definitely is a disjuncture between the clean audit story and the good governance and service delivery story, which I would love to really explore further, because I think, unfortunately, we don't have, you know, time on this call. But I think there's a big story in that context, a big discussion that is about putting people at the center of our conversations, which currently isn't happening. And I think I can safely say, even in the municipalities that are speaking of clean audits, I think we could benefit from having those conversations and actually engaging people at the delivery end. And I'll stop there. I recognize we've run out of time. I promise you we're going to go back to this conversation. Special thanks to all my guests this evening. Unfortunately, we have to leave it here. Do join us again tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. sharp. The Watchdog, your show for these kinds of issues. Have a good night.